She was the most tragic queen in European history, blessed with unparalleled beauty. She was hopelessly infatuated with love. She was Joanna, the most dazzling princess of Spain. At the age of 17, her mother, Isabella I, betrothed her to Philip, the Archduke of Austria and heir to the Habsburg dynasty, known as the Handsome. At that time, she shared an intimate bond with her younger sister, Catherine. Amidst the reluctant gaze of her first love, she bid farewell to her family and crossed the ocean. Half a month later, Joanna met her fiancé for the first time. When she laid eyes on the tall, handsome man before her, her heart fluttered. This was her first taste of love. Philip was even more charming than the legends described. In turn, Philip showed his affection for Joanna. A passionate, domineering kiss made Joanna fall in love instantly. Philip ordered the cumbersome rituals to be discarded. He couldn't wait a moment longer to hold the wedding. Thus, in the presence of handmaidens and courtiers, a priest officiated the ceremony on the spot. As soon as the prayer ended, Philip carried Joanna to the bridal chamber. For the next few days, they never stepped out of the chamber. When Philip finally allowed his wife to go outside, Joanna had almost forgotten how to walk. The handmaidens couldn't help but chuckle at her inability to close her legs. Soon, Joanna gave birth to a daughter for Philip. At this point, they were still immersed in happiness, but during Joanna's confinement, Philip's mood began to shift dramatically. He grew disdainful of his wife, who had just given birth. Joanna noticed the change in her husband. Desperate to win back his favor, she ignored her unhealed body and tried to sleep with Philip to keep his heart. Unexpectedly, Philip rejected her coldly and left without a trace of affection. Even so, their relationship didn't deteriorate completely. Before long, Joanna was pregnant with their second child. To avoid disappointing Philip, Joanna, 8 months pregnant, stayed by her husband's side all night, dancing. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain in her abdomen, but to maintain her dignity, she showed no sign of suffering. She merely instructed her personal handmaiden and then walked straight to the privy. When the handmaiden informed Philip of Joanna's discomfort, he paid no heed. Instead, he turned to his female companion and resumed dancing as if nothing had happened. In the privy, Joanna groaned in pain. A few minutes later, the cry of a baby echoed. When the handmaiden pulled back the curtain, she found Joanna had safely given birth to a son. Joanna had bitten off the umbilical cord with her own teeth. Meanwhile, Joanna's mother, Isabella I of Spain, passed away from illness. Joanna's first love, accompanied by envoys, came to Spain to deliver the tragic news. Joanna was her mother's favorite daughter. Upon hearing the news, she was overwhelmed with grief. At this moment, she desperately needed her husband's comfort, but her handmaiden told her that Philip had been staying in a servant's room for several days, refusing to come out. When Joanna burst into the handmaiden's room, she indeed witnessed an unsightly scene. However, the handmaiden fled through the back door, and Joanna's emotions collapsed instantly. She frantically sniffed the scent on the bed, determined to find out which woman had seduced her husband, but Philip offered no explanation, remaining indifferent. Women are inherently gifted in matters of the heart. Joanna gathered all the handmaidens in the palace and identified the one who had slept with Philip by scent. Yet in that era, although male royals and nobles were legally bound to monogamy, their frequent philandering was not considered a crime. Joanna could only humiliate the handmaiden and then let her go. When Philip saw his new lover looking pitiful, he grew displeased with his wife's actions. During dinner that day, instead of comforting Joanna, who had just lost her mother, Philip questioned her for mistreating the handmaiden. His attitude pushed Joanna to the brink of madness. Angrily, she demanded to know what the handmaiden had that she didn't. In a rage, Joanna picked up a knife, pointed it at Philip, and threatened him to promise eternal love. When Philip tried to flee again, Joanna suddenly changed her demeanor. She attempted once more to use her body to rekindle her husband's initial love. Joanna's humiliation and intolerance temporarily kept Philip by her side. After her mother's death, as Isabella's eldest surviving daughter, Joanna was set to inherit the throne of Spain. Philip returned to Spain with her, hoping to reform her husband. Joanna decreed that Philip would share the power to handle state affairs. To prevent Philip from flirting with handmaidens, she ordered all palace maids to dress plainly and uniformly in dark colors. But no matter how attentive Joanna was, Philip remained incorrigible. He spent his days in brothels, fixated on all manner of seductive women. Joanna's personal handmaiden told her of Philip's renewed betrayal but urged her, as a queen, to prioritize the greater good and not let Philip distract her. Yet despite knowing her husband's actions, Joanna waited daily for his return, greeting him with her most fervent longing when he appeared. But Philip saw this as torment and complained to her about his grievances. When her affection went unrequited, Joanna slapped Philip twice. Unexpectedly, Philip, unafraid of her royal status, struck back at the noble queen without hesitation. Even then, Joanna refused to give up on him. In the days that followed, Philip often left for days on end under the pretext of hunting. In reality, he was pursuing different women, indulging in passionate encounters. Joanna chose to turn a blind eye, content as long as he accompanied her at official events. Even while heavily pregnant, she went out of her way to please him, but Philip had long lost interest in her. Even finding her actions repulsive, he complained to his father-in-law about this. Joanna's father, who had always envied Isabella's power, encouraged his son-in-law to tell the courtiers that Joanna was mentally unstable and unfit to rule, promising to help Philip seize the throne. Unaware of her husband and father's conspiracy to frame her, Joanna was still racking her brain to test Philip's love. She deliberately summoned her first love to her chamber, pretending to be intimate with him. When Philip burst in and saw this, she planned to gauge his love by his reaction. Seeing her husband's fury, a smile tugged at Joanna's lips. She excitedly told her handmaiden that her husband still loved her. Little did she know, this played right into Philip's hands. Philip spread rumors that Joanna was promiscuous, indulging in debauchery and neglecting state affairs. To make Joanna appear erratic, he put the token of love she had given him around a handmaiden's neck, deliberately letting Joanna see it. As expected, this sequence of events drove Joanna to lose her senses again. Egged on by bribed handmaidens, Joanna, abandoning all royal dignity, cursed the handmaiden for seducing her husband in front of the courtiers. Enraged, she rushed outside, grabbed a sword from the guards, and returned, screaming at the handmaiden and threatening her to remove the necklace. Joanna's outburst frightened the handmaiden away. The ministers, hearing the commotion, entered to find their queen wielding a sword like a madwoman, roaring. This convinced the courtiers of Philip's claims. For the sake of the country, they held an important meeting to discuss Spain's future. Finally, the Minister of Defense approached Joanna, hoping to test her mental state again, but Joanna was investigating who had spread the rumors, having her attendants compare handwriting samples. She furiously drove all the ministers away. Soon, when the ministers agreed to let Philip, who held equal status with Joanna, ascend to the throne to handle state affairs, Joanna's first love saw through everything. He told Joanna all his suspicions. Joanna claimed she was just playing along and no longer loved him, but her first love insisted he had hesitated long before deciding to speak up. Philip's plot was to usurp the throne, marry a new wife, and abandon her. At this moment, Joanna finally woke up. Just as Philip thought his plan to seize power was about to succeed, having obtained most of the courtiers' signatures in the council chamber, he slowly walked toward the king's throne. Unexpectedly, a commotion erupted outside the door. Joanna looked back at the man she loved deeply but saw no remorse in his eyes. Leaving her utterly heartbroken, she stepped onto the throne and declared she was sane. No matter who spread rumors or for what purpose, lies would always be lies. She would not allow anyone to tamper with the royal order. Joanna urged the ministers not to be deceived, warning them not to choose the wrong side before turning to leave. Although the courtiers still couldn't fully trust their queen's sanity, the people who had long supported Isabella and her were the most compelling evidence. Philip's plan failed, and he was so frightened that his legs went weak. But Joanna did not hold him accountable. A month later, Philip fell ill due to his promiscuous lifestyle and took to his bed. Even though his body was covered in pus-filled sores, Joanna showed no disgust. Only at this moment did Philip feel his wife's profound love. Joanna summoned the nation's top doctors, determined to cure Philip. She was willing to trade her throne if it meant saving him, but the doctors all said there was nothing they could do. Joanna prayed day and night for Philip, but his condition worsened. On his deathbed, he deeply repented for his actions. Joanna didn't dwell on whether he regretted his debauchery or the harm he'd done to her. With that, Philip took his last breath. Yet to keep her husband by her side forever, Joanna had his body embalmed and placed in her chamber. But Joanna's misfortunes didn't end with Philip's death. Years later, her son and father joined forces to imprison her as a madwoman for 47 years. This queen, who had endured the loss of her beloved mother and successive betrayals by her husband, father, and even her own son, spent the rest of her life deprived of freedom. Until her death, She never found true love. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.